know y'all didn't think I was gonna let Pride Month go by and not make content. Happy Pride Month, y'all.
Happy gay month, because you know you gay and stuff.
I've never given Pride the love and space that it deserves on my channel. It kind of just goes without saying, though, because I am a part of the Rainbow Coalition. This month, I do want to make a concerted effort to really celebrate and honor my fellow Rainbow Renegades who are now ancestors. And I can think of no better place to start than the love, lust, and liaisons found between same-sex black people during the transatlantic slave trade. Too often, the experiences of enslaved black people is distilled to their pain and suffering, and while that pain is not only a fact of their forced bondage and an inevitable part of their history that deserves attention and discussion, I always aim to view black people's experiences during this time from angles that offer more nuance to their experiences. As I always say, enslaved people were still people, and in the midst of their suffering and hardship, they also had a wide range of other experiences, including queer ones. Formerly enslaved British Nigerian writer and abolitionist Olaudah Equiano, y'all, I'm so sorry, I know I butchered his name, but Olaudah Equiano wrote of his experiences as a formerly enslaved man in 1789 in his autobiography, The Interesting Narrative. Equiano speaks of a white passenger aboard the ship that brought him from Africa who went by the name Queen. He states, "Queen messed with me on board and became very attached to me, saying that he and I should never part." Now, I doubt that this was necessarily a consensual relationship, but it does seem that Equiano did have consensual same-sex relationships and genuine same-sex attraction during his life. He writes about another white companion later on that he became very fond of. He said, "I became very fond of this man," and he said that he and this man laid in each other's bosoms many nights. So it does seem that this was a consenting same-sex partner for him. Equiano doesn't name this particular companion that he speaks of, but I found with the very few accounts of recorded same-sex history that I could find during slavery that this isn't uncommon. Being that both interracial and same-sex relationships were obviously very stigmatized, there were concerted efforts to hide or at the very least obscure the details around some of these accounts. Original Snow Bunny hunter Frederick Douglass also had same-sex relationships, which he does not detail except to say that he had a, quote, long and intimate, though by no means friendly, relations with a former slave master. Again, obviously, no sexual contact between a slave and a slave master can be consensual, so whether Frederick was alluding to a sexual relationship that was at least enjoyable for him, despite not being consensual, or if he was alluding to a more violent sexual relationship with this slave master, we can't be sure. What we can be sure of, however, is that same-sex attraction and genderqueer expression was neither uncommon nor unheard of, as was the case with William Dorsey Swann, a formerly enslaved man whom upon freedom in his adulthood would become the first recorded black drag queen and the godmother of ballroom. Swann would host private parties called drags, which is shorthand for the term grand rags, which is an antiquated term for masquerade balls. In keeping with their grand history of ruining black and gay people's fun, the authorities would eventually bust one of Swann's parties, during which they found 6 black drag queens all decked out in ball gowns, corsets, hosiery, and nice shoes, women's shoes. If these men were around Dorsey Swann's age, that would suggest that other men of his generation, i.e., formerly enslaved men, were also inclined to genderqueer expression. In fact, through slavery, queerness and blackness are inextricably linked. In its attempt to justify slavery, the rigid gender roles meant to be adhered to by white men and women were denied to black men and women, with black men being routinely withheld from obtaining markers of masculinity, such as the acquisition of property and power. Similarly, black women were also denied access to femininity. Their virtue was not only not protected, unlike white women's, but was deemed non-existent. And this denial of femininity and softness rendered them male by default, which meant that they were subjected to labor that was just as, if not more so, grueling and backbreaking as any black man. A fact which Sojourner Truth confronted in her speech on womanhood. And I call it her speech on womanhood and not her Ain't I a Woman speech, because I've recently learned from FD Signifier that Ain't I a Woman was a bastardization of the way that Sojourner Truth spoke. In reality, she did not say "ain't I a woman." In fact, she was very eloquent and did not use that kind of shorthanded slang at all in the speech. It was actually a white woman who took the speech, bastardized it, and changed it up into "ain't I a woman," although she did not utter that particular phrase. Real crazy. So anywho, that's why I'm going to call it Sojourner Truth's speech on womanhood. Anyway, in her speech, she confronted genderqueer expression as a black woman. In Christopher S. Lewis's Neuter-Bound Neuter-Freed, he uses a quote from Truth's speech in which she says, "I am a woman's rights. I have as much muscle as any man and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed, and can any man do more than that? I can carry as much as any man, and can eat as much too, if I can get it. I am as strong as any man that is now." Lewis posits that Truth's statement can be read as an interrogation of what defines womanhood and masculinity. He says her speech asks the audience members to broaden their conception of womanhood to include black women, black people, muscled masculinity, and black women's masculine expression. It prompts us to consider female masculinity and other gendered masculinity, as well as genderqueer expression during slavery in general. I bring this up so that we can consider the many ways that queerness has shown up during slavery. Of course, there are a few accounts of same-sex relations between enslaved people or enslaved people and their enslavers, but we also see examples of genderqueer expression and gender fluidity as well. This Pride Month, I think it's important not only to talk about LGBTQ plus history that we know goes unsung, but to consider the history that we didn't even think to consider before. And that's kind of what I hope to do with my channel this Pride Month. So I do hope you guys enjoyed that. And until next time, y'all, a happy Pride.